They said money could buy anything, but when a billionaire mocked a waitress and asked her for financial advice just to make her squirm, her first words froze the whole restaurant and changed his life forever. If you think you've seen arrogance, think again. This story will shake you. Before we begin, hit subscribe, turn on the bell icon, and stick around, because what happens next will make you rethink who the real genius in the room was. It was one of those glittering Manhattan evenings when wealth felt like perfume, thick in the air, heavy with the scent of ambition and pride. The people who dined at the Marlowe, a rooftop restaurant overlooking Central Park, weren't just rich, they were the kind of rich that thought they owned the skyline. Every night the laughter of brokers, CEOs, and bored trust fund heirs floated across the marble floors like music that only money could play. And on that evening, at the center table near the glass railing, sat Richard Hemsley, a self-made billionaire who loved to prove that he was smarter than anyone in the room. Richard was the definition of power. Mid-50s, silver-haired, dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's rent for a year, and with that practiced smirk of someone who'd never heard the word no. He built his empire from real estate and tech, buying, selling, flipping, acquiring, and people called him the machine because of his cold precision. He was the kind of man who measured success by how small he could make others feel. That night, he wasn't alone. Around him sat 3 other men, all equally polished, all laughing too hard at his jokes. They'd been discussing investments, IPOs, and the usual bragging contests about whose yacht was longer or whose watch was rarer. The waiter brought their wine, a 1982 Chateau Margaux, and that's when she walked over. Naomi Carter, a waitress, black, mid-20s, tall with posture that didn't belong to the service industry, there was a quiet confidence in her stride, something almost regal. Her uniform was the same black and white attire everyone wore, but on her it looked different, as if she wore it on purpose, not out of obligation. Her name tag shimmered under the golden light, and for a moment, Richard found himself watching her longer than he intended. Then he snapped out of it, smirking again, eager to entertain his guests. "Gentlemen," he said with a grin, swirling his wine, "watch this." Naomi approached with her order pad. "Good evening, gentlemen. Would you like to see the dessert menu?" Richard leaned back, eyes glinting with mischief. "Dessert? No, sweetheart. I've got a better idea." He gestured toward her with his glass. "Tell me something, since you probably deal with rich people all day, maybe you can give me some financial advice." The table erupted in laughter. It was meant to be a joke, a cruel one. Naomi's expression didn't change. She didn't blush or fumble. She looked directly at him, unflinching, her eyes calm and unreadable. "Sure," she said softly, her voice even and clear. "My first advice: stop thinking money makes you smart." The laughter died instantly. Richard's smirk froze midair. The sound of a fork dropping 2 tables away echoed louder than it should have. One of his companions coughed awkwardly, another reached for his glass just to do something. Naomi didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, her gaze steady on Richard. He chuckled, trying to reclaim control. "That's cute," he said. "But you might want to be careful who you say that to." "I am careful," Naomi replied, her tone smooth as silk. "That's why I'm saying it to you." For a split second, something flickered behind Richard's eyes, annoyance, then intrigue. Nobody spoke to him like that, not in public, not ever. But, instead of blowing up, he did what powerful men often do when they're challenged, he smiled wider. "Well," he said, "since you're clearly full of wisdom, let's make it interesting. Give me one solid piece of financial advice, something you think could help me make more money. If it's good, I'll tip you $1,000. If it's not," he shrugged, "you'll still get your regular wage. Deal?" Naomi's eyes didn't waver. "Make it 10,000, she said. The table went silent again. Richard laughed, leaning forward. "You've got nerve. I've got bills," she said simply. "So what's it gonna be? You want to hear real advice, or just pretend you do?" The audacity of her words sent a ripple through the table. Richard's friends exchanged glances, half shocked, half entertained. He stared at her for a long second, studying the calm confidence on her face. There was no fear in her, only truth. And that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. "Fine," he said finally. $10,000 for your financial wisdom. Let's hear it." Naomi smiled faintly, as if she'd just been waiting for that line. "Okay," she said, setting her tray down on the empty table beside them. "Here's my advice, Mr. Hemsley. You're rich because you understand money. But you'll stay rich only if you start understanding people." He frowned. Excuse me, you spend your life buying companies, firing staff, cutting corners, she continued, her tone calm, measured. You see humans as numbers on a spreadsheet. But the thing about numbers is, they can disappear overnight. People can't. The smartest investment isn't the one that doubles your income, it's the one that multiplies your loyalty. The men at the table shifted uneasily. It was as if she'd peeled something raw open. Richard forced a laugh, though it sounded thinner now. You think I built a billion-dollar empire by being nice? Naomi tilted her head. No, you built it by being scared. That hit harder than he expected. Scared? Yes, she said quietly. People like you always are. You confuse control with safety. You think if you own everything, no one can hurt you. But the truth is, you're terrified of losing it all. You're not building wealth, you're building walls. The silence that followed was absolute. Somewhere in the background, soft jazz played, but even that seemed distant now. Richard's hand tightened around his wine glass, his pulse ticking faster. He should have been furious, but all he felt was, exposed. Who the hell do you think you are? He muttered finally. Naomi gave a small smile. Someone who sees you. Then she turned, picked up her tray, and walked away. For the rest of the evening, Richard couldn't focus. The laughter from his table had faded, his friends made excuses and left early. He sat there long after the plates were cleared, staring out over the lights of Manhattan, her words echoing in his head. You're not building wealth, you're building walls. He told himself it was nonsense. Some waitress trying to sound profound. But the truth was, something in her tone, something unshakably real, had gotten under his skin. That night, when he returned to his penthouse overlooking the Hudson, he poured himself another glass of wine and opened his laptop. But instead of checking stocks, he typed in her name from the receipt, Naomi Carter. He expected nothing, maybe a social media profile, maybe nothing at all. But what he found stopped him cold. Naomi Carter, economics major, Harvard University, class of 2021. Former Goldman Sachs intern, founder of a nonprofit called The Ripple Effect, focused on financial literacy for underprivileged youth. What the? He whispered. She wasn't just a waitress. She was brilliant, and apparently, she'd chosen to be there. But why? That question kept him awake long into the night. The next day, he returned to the Marlowe, not for dinner, but early in the afternoon when it was nearly empty. Naomi was there, setting up tables. When she saw him, her eyebrows lifted slightly. Back already? She asked. I wanted to talk, he said. About what? Another bet? He smiled faintly. No, about your advice. She crossed her arms. Which part? The part about understanding people. He hesitated, feeling strangely awkward, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. You were right, I don't usually hear things like that. Naomi gave a small shrug. Most people don't say them. Why are you here? He asked finally. You could be at Goldman, or running that nonprofit full-time. Why serve tables? She smiled slightly. Because people show their real selves when they think you're beneath them. You learn more about human behavior here than you ever could in a boardroom. That answer silenced him again. It wasn't what he expected. And it was the first time in years he felt small. Then Naomi leaned forward. You want real financial advice, Mr. Hemsley. Start investing in empathy. You'd be surprised how profitable it can be. He stared at her, and for the first time, something inside him shifted. That was how it began, a billionaire who thought he knew everything, and a waitress who knew exactly what he didn't. But neither of them could have imagined how their lives were about to intertwine, or the secrets Naomi was hiding, secrets that would soon make Richard question everything about his empire, his family, and even himself. The following week, Richard couldn't stop thinking about Naomi. He'd spent his life analyzing numbers, not people, but now he found himself analyzing her. The waitress with Harvard credentials, the calm confidence, the piercing truth in her voice. It didn't add up. People like her didn't wait tables. He told himself it was curiosity, nothing more. But when he sent his assistant to discreetly pull a background report, what came back made his chest tighten. Naomi Carter had once been on the fast track, full scholarship, awards, a Goldman Sachs offer. Then, 3 years ago, she vanished from the corporate world. No LinkedIn activity, no new address. Just a faint paper trail leading to a small nonprofit, the Ripple Effect Foundation, registered in Harlem, working with underprivileged teens on money management. He didn't understand it. Why would someone with that much potential trade millions for minimum wage? So, like a man who couldn't help himself, he drove uptown. The address led him to an old brick community center. Peeling paint, cracked windows, a faded banner that read, "Empowering the Future." Inside, kids sat around mismatched tables, learning about savings, budgeting, investments, from Naomi herself. She wasn't in uniform here, she was alive, radiant, passionate. She smiled as she spoke, and every eye in the room followed her. Richard stood by the doorway, unseen for a moment, watching her draw diagrams on the whiteboard. "The goal isn't to escape poverty," she said, her voice strong and sure. "It's to break its pattern. Money is a tool, not a mirror. You're not worth less because you have less. Remember that." Those words hit him harder than he expected. For a man worth billions, he suddenly felt bankrupt in ways that had nothing to do with dollars. When the session ended, Naomi spotted him. She didn't look surprised. "You found me," she said, crossing her arms. He offered a faint smile. "You didn't exactly make it hard." She chuckled softly. "You'd be surprised how invisible you can be when you stop chasing attention." "I wanted to see what you do here," he admitted. "It's impressive." "Thanks," she said, picking up her bag. "But it's not impressive. It's necessary. You'd be shocked how many of these kids' parents work 2 jobs and still can't afford basic banking access. I teach them because nobody taught me." That last line hung in the air. He hesitated, then asked quietly, "What happened to you, Naomi? You could have been on Wall Street." Her expression changed, the warmth in her eyes dimmed, replaced by something colder. "Wall Street didn't want someone like me once I stopped playing their game," she said. "I called out a fund manager for insider trading during my internship. Guess who got blacklisted instead?" Richard's stomach dropped. They made an example out of me," she finished. "So I decided if the system was rigged, I'd teach people how to build their own." For the first time, he didn't have a clever answer. "Naomi," he said after a long pause, "what if I helped you expand this? The ripple effect. I could fund it, make it national." She studied him, almost amused. "Why? Out of guilt?" "No," he said quickly. "Because you're right. I've spent my life making money from people. Maybe it's time I start making money for them." Naomi tilted her head, searching his face for sincerity. After a long moment, she said softly, "If you're serious, then you don't fund it, you earn it. Spend a week here. Work with us. No assistants, no suits. Just you." Richard blinked. "A week? Yeah," she said, smiling faintly. "Think of it as an investment in humanity." He wanted to laugh it off, but something inside him said yes before his pride could say no. "Deal," he said, and that was how the billionaire who owned skyscrapers ended up sweeping floors in a Harlem community center, teaching kids how to open savings accounts, learning what hunger felt like, not in the stomach but in the heart. On the 3rd day, Naomi noticed something change in him. He wasn't performing anymore. He was listening, watching, asking questions. The arrogance that once shadowed his every move had started to crumble. On the 5th day, he joined Naomi on a walk home through the rain. They stopped outside a small, run-down apartment building. "This is where you live?" he asked softly. "For now," she said. "The foundation takes most of what I make. It's worth it." He looked at her for a long time. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he murmured. "Who?" "My mother," he said. "She used to say money isn't supposed to make you powerful, it's supposed to make you useful. I forgot that somewhere along the way." Naomi smiled gently. "Then maybe it's time to remember." He nodded, but deep inside, he felt something else, an ache he couldn't name. That night, when he returned home, he found a letter on his desk. It wasn't from Naomi, it was from his company's legal department. Urgent. Internal audit reveals missing funds in the Horizon Charity Trust. Possible fraud by executive board. Immediate action required. The Horizon Charity Trust, his company's flagship, philanthropy arm. The same one he'd used for tax write-offs. And in that moment, a horrifying realization dawned on him. Naomi's foundation, her work, her message about honesty and people, it wasn't coincidence. She had known about Horizon. She was trying to tell him something. He picked up his phone and dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. "Naomi," he said, his voice sharp. "You knew, didn't you? About Horizon." There was silence on the line. Then she said quietly, "I didn't know. But I suspected. Because I used to work for them." Richard's heart stopped. "You what?" "I was fired after I questioned some of their reports," she said. 3 years ago. That's why I left the corporate world. I didn't realize you were the man behind it, until that night at the restaurant. He sank into his chair, the weight of his empire suddenly crushing him. So all this time, Naomi said, I wasn't just giving you advice, Richard. I was giving you a chance to make it right. For the first time in 20 years, Richard Hemsley felt something he didn't recognize, fear. Not of losing money or reputation, but of finally seeing himself through someone else's eyes. Naomi's revelation hit like a thunderclap. She hadn't come into his life by coincidence. Fate, or maybe justice, had brought her back, and now, every smug joke, every dollar he'd weaponized, burned in his memory like a confession. He couldn't sleep that night. He poured whiskey, paced the glass balcony of his penthouse, and stared at the city he owned, or thought he did. Below him, thousands of lights flickered like lives he'd ignored. He opened his laptop again, this time not to check stocks, but to dig. The audit was right. Millions had been siphoned from the Horizon Charity Trust, funneled into shell companies by two of his top executives. The charity meant to fund schools and hospitals had become a laundering scheme under his watch. He'd signed every paper, never looked twice. He'd trusted numbers more than people. At 3 a.m., he made a decision. He called his lawyer. Shut it all down, he said. Freeze Horizon's accounts, and file charges against everyone involved, including me if necessary. The lawyer hesitated. Sir, that could destroy your company. Then let it burn, Richard snapped. If I built it wrong, maybe it deserves to fall. The next morning, Naomi found him waiting outside the community center. No suit this time, just a plain gray hoodie and jeans, his eyes heavy but clearer than before. You look different, she said. Maybe I finally see what's real, he replied quietly. You were right about Horizon. I'm going to clean it up. Every stolen dollar will go where it was meant to. Naomi nodded, but there was sadness in her smile. Good, but you know, this isn't about redemption for you. It's about restitution for them. I know, he said. But, I don't know where to start. She looked at him for a long moment. Start by showing up, every day, not as a billionaire, but as a man. So he did. Over the next few weeks, Richard kept his promise. He poured millions into rebuilding the Ripple Effect Foundation, but not as a silent investor. He came every day, taught financial workshops, helped kids open their first bank accounts. The media caught wind of it, and headlines exploded. Billionaire exposes his own charity scandal, partners with former Waitress to educate youth. From Wall Street to Harlem, Richard Hemsley's fall and rise. Reporters begged for interviews. Late-night hosts joked about the billionaire who got schooled by a waitress. But Richard didn't care anymore. He'd stopped performing. And Naomi, she became the face of something bigger. She turned her foundation into a movement. Banks started listening. Schools wanted her curriculum. For the first time, the poor weren't being helped, they were being taught. Still, there was one truth Richard couldn't escape. Every night, when the cameras were gone, he saw her working late in that dim office, eyes tired but burning with purpose. And every night, he wondered why someone who'd been hurt so deeply by the world could still fight for it. One evening, he found her on the roof of the center, staring at the city lights. Naomi, he said softly, why didn't you destroy me when you had the chance? She didn't turn. Because you didn't destroy me when you had the power to, she said. You mocked me, but you listened. That's rare. He stepped beside her. I don't deserve your forgiveness. She looked at him finally. You don't need it. You just need to do better. He smiled faintly. I'm trying. I know, she said. That's why the kids believe in you now. They see you showing up. They see a man learning. Do you? He asked quietly. Her eyes softened. I see a man rebuilding. That's enough. Months passed. The scandal faded into memory. Horizon was reborn under Naomi's management. The Ripple Effect went national, funded by honest money, run by people who'd once been invisible. And Richard, he changed in ways even he couldn't have predicted. He sold 2 of his companies, moved into a smaller home, and established scholarships under Naomi's name. Not for publicity, but because it felt right. He even started visiting schools himself, teaching kids about compound interest and honesty with the same humility Naomi had taught him. But just when life seemed calm again, fate had one more twist. One evening, Naomi collapsed during a workshop. Exhaustion, the doctors said. Malnutrition, dehydration, stress. She'd been giving too much, too fast. Richard sat by her hospital bed, watching her chest rise and fall under the white sheets. The machines beeped softly, and for the first time in years, tears fell freely down his face. When she woke, she smiled weakly. "You look terrible," she whispered. "So do you," he said, his voice trembling. She chuckled softly, then winced. "Guess I forgot to invest in myself." "Don't ever say that again," he said fiercely. "You've given this world more than it deserves." Naomi reached out, her hand finding his. "No, Richard, I've just given it what it needed." He squeezed her hand gently. "Rest now. The world can wait. A week later, she was back on her feet. The foundation reopened with an even larger team. And one morning, as the sun rose over the Harlem skyline, Naomi stepped onto a small stage in front of hundreds of students, parents, and volunteers. Richard stood beside her. She took the microphone. "3 years ago, I lost everything because I spoke up against greed," she began. "But today, I stand with a man who once embodied that greed, and chose to change. That's what the ripple effect means. One small act of courage can create waves that reach farther than we ever imagine." The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. Richard felt something deep in his chest shift again. Not pride, not guilt, but peace. Then Naomi looked at him and said into the mic, "This foundation exists because someone believed that even the powerful can learn empathy. And that's the richest lesson of all." He didn't expect what came next. She turned to him, smiled, and said softly, "Thank you, Richard." For once, he had no words. That night, after everyone left, he stood alone in the empty hall, staring at the banner that read, "The Ripple Effect, Changing Lives, One Mind at a Time." He thought of that first night, the cruel joke, the arrogance, the glass of wine, the woman who refused to bow. He'd come to test her. Instead, she'd tested him. The billionaire had asked for financial advice, but what she gave him was far greater, a lesson in humanity. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "She didn't just save them, she saved me." Epilogue. A year later, a Forbes article titled, "The Redemption of Richard Hemsley," went viral. It called him, "the man who turned guilt into purpose." But buried near the end was a single quote that said it all. "Greater than, I used to think wealth was measured in millions. Now I know it's measured in how many lives you lift with yours." And beneath that quote was a photo, Richard and Naomi, side by side, surrounded by laughing children, chalk dust on their hands, sunlight streaming through cracked windows that no longer looked broken, just lived in. The caption read, "The Billionaire and the Wait."